So in my top 5 rework video, there were a lot of mentions of Chroma needing some love. Unfortunately, I had this entire script basically locked and loaded conceptually, and so I threw up a poll to see if the interest was there, and it most certainly was. So we're going to be taking a look at our outdated dragon friend and how I've decided to rework his kit. Thank you guys so much for the subs, hypes, comments, likes, and most importantly, your viewership. I have so much love for you all, for contributing to the growth of this channel and the growth of me as a creator. Thank you. I am truly blessed. So let's get started. A couple of notes before we start though. So you can fully understand my approaches to the reworks. Not many content creators do this kind of content, so I don't really have a good goal point. So I'm going to kind of do my own style here. A couple of disclaimers basically for my reworks because I want to make more rework content like this. It doesn't get as many views, but it's just a passion project I really enjoy. So, okay, let's get started. My goal is basically always to keep in theme of what Digital Extremes intended, unless I truly believe a certain ability, mechanic, or concept is completely unsalvageable, which is just not very often at all, and it's not the case here, so don't worry about it. Or if I believe my idea is so awesome I want to share anyways. I might even include ideas that didn't make it to the final concept, might make a YouTube membership for that or something, I don't know. 2, numbers are basically always arbitrary, so they're kind of in the air. Don't criticize the numbers. They have some point of reference, they have some thought put into them, but the numbers in terms of reworked abilities and values, they're just arbitrary. They're there as placeholders for the most part, with a little bit of thought. 3, I tend to write these reworks with nearly the strongest version of them I can conceive. My main aim is a proof of concept. Not everything is entirely refined and complete with absolution, as even game devs who collect paychecks to do this stuff don't have everything right the first try. You know, I can't playtest this, right? I rely on the comments and future revisions to shed any extra fat and create something more balanced and complete. I want to get all my ideas out there. So if you're going to throw rocks through my window in the comments, throw some solutions too, and just please... Oh, hey, Monk, you can't see how broken this is, dude? This is so... I know, I made it that way. That way it can be edited, okay? Please don't be obnoxious. This last disclaimer doesn't apply to all my rework videos, but remember that I need to not only meet the Warframe itself where it's at, but also the game, the meta game of Warframe and where it's at. If damage is a part of what is meta, which is currently the case, and a frame is outdated because of that, I have to keep that in mind. I understand certain frames have really cool themes, but ultimately part of being useful is being able to do the content that is meta, that is important, and sometimes a betrayal of a frame's theme is required. Though that's not the case here, it might be for future content. Chroma seems to have this weird little aesthetic with like naming abilities that he's like a ghost dragon. I think that has to do with his quest, but I haven't played the new Strange in literally 10 years. Really baller stuff, but I'm going to be making a pivot to an elemental dragon as that's in his bio, and that is very clearly the goal of his theme, right? Leaving the ghost stuff for Dagoth in future frames, because I don't feel like the ghost part is done particularly well, if at all. The abilities are just named that way. I'm not sure why. Spectral Scream, Vex Armor, Elemental Ward, Effigy. Very confusing. And just a quick TLDR of what I'm going to be working on here. Spectral Scream sucks. No one's going to fight me on that, thank God. Elemental Ward is acceptable, but needs a good bit of modernization and some buffs to make it more interesting and consistent, for sure. Consistency is a huge part of Elemental Ward. Vex Armor I like a lot. It kind of receives the least changes here. Probably some math stuff, probably some convenient stuff, a little bit of modernization, but Vex Armor is Chroma's best ability, I'd say, and needs the least help. And Effigy in this rework, I'm just going to spoil it, is being buffed immensely. It's made to feel more like an ultimate feeling ability, and overall with that, I'm going to be tying the kit together to feel very cohesive, like a modern Warframe should. So we're going to go ability by ability and talk about what I want changed using... if you're just listening, you will have a serviceable experience, but know that I'm going to be including some very elementary visual representations to help you understand exactly what I'm talking about when I voice my concerns and explain the reworked ability to you. Starting with Chroma's passive, I actually kind of want to keep this one the same. It's not amazing. It's basically a second jump maneuver after your double jump. So you can bullet jump twice. I actually think with some parkour velocity, I unironically think this is a good passive, especially as far as passives go. If you wanted to add something to it, maybe like, you know, your bullet jump in a radius deals the status you've selected on Elemental Ward, like, that's fine too, I guess, but I actually think his passive is pretty fine. Having 2 bullet jumps is very underrated in my view, and not a lot of people play Chroma, so they don't really understand it, but I actually think it's a good passive. If you want more, you can have more, but I think it's totally fine. Spectral Scream is being changed to Chromatic Ball. I wanted to do a really simple change for this one. I think it's a fine concept. The ability itself sucks, but it's mainly because it's channeled and locks you out of other things. So I'm going to be adding just a real basic change. On cast, Chroma fires an elemental ball from his selected element, exploding on contact with a surface or enemy, dealing elemental damage and guaranteed status. Status chance is higher the closer to the center of the ball the victims are. Enemies hit by electric and cold balls, nice, have a chance to drop energy orbs. Enemies hit by heat and toxin balls, nice, have a chance to drop health orbs. Likewise, the tap and hold cast is being removed from this ability to rotate elements and is being moved to the new elemental ward. I'm also adding a synergy with Chroma's new ultimate here, so you should stay tuned for that, because this ability on its own is not very glamorous. It is essentially like a frost freeze or an ember fireball, but I'm giving it more to do here once we get to the ultimate. So will people still helmet it off? Yeah, possibly, but they will be losing something from new effigy, which is kind of my goal. I want there to be a lot more weight when you're helmeting off an ability. So yeah, all Spectral Scream is being changed to is essentially a fireball that shoots out an elemental ball for whichever element you have selected on elemental ward. Additionally, you're also able to give yourself some energy, give yourself some health orbs, two things that, a lot of Warframe 1 abilities kind of do this, where they do some damage, do some status, give you orbs of different kinds. I think this is totally acceptable and works really well, and also, while being a viable helmet slot, still earns its spot in the kit, and especially with the effigy synergy I'm going to be adding, will end up really strong. Elemental Ward. This is going to be a bit of a mouthful, so you guys just need to sit with me. Now going to be called Elemental Hide / Elemental Cloak. I'm not sure which one. This is one of the weirdest and most outdated abilities that Chroma, or really any Warframe for that matter, possesses. Weird unmoddable 5-meter aura ranges, insanely low base numbers, absolutely funky mechanics, and some are pretty neat. I just want Chroma to feel like a more complete Warframe, not reliant on gimmicks, like the whole, dual Ichor and Karnan clouds, melee influence with the ice version. There's just weird stuff going on there. And making Elemental Ward work requires a Chroma one-trick level of knowledge, and while I think one-trick level of knowledge is very cool, making an entire ability work based off of a ton of forbidden ball knowledge is kind of absurd. Likewise, as I mentioned before, Elemental Ward is now the tap hold cast ability that allows you to rotate through Chroma's elements. On cast, Chroma releases an aura with 10 meters of range, dealing the status effect and damage per second of his equipped element. Chroma and allies within affinity range also gain offensive and defensive buffs based on the element selected. For heat, this is plus 45% heat damage from all sources, scaling with strength, and plus 60% additive health bonus, scaling with strength. For electricity, this is plus 25% electricity damage from all sources, scaling with strength. I'm going to stop saying that. You could kind of assume most of this stuff scales with strength. And plus 35% additive shield bonus. Additionally, with electricity, 10% of damage dealt from enemies is reflected, dealing electricity damage with a 25% base status chance. For toxin, plus 25% toxin damage from all sources, plus 50% reload speed, plus 50% holster amp damage for 5 seconds, plus 35% fire rate, and plus 20% movement speed and parkour velocity. Toxin's the one I'm least confident in the changes with. I know currently it has this 5% max health toxin damage, but it's its own little toxin proc, and it's confusing and it's outdated and it's whatever. Cold was a bit difficult as well, but it's not, nothing crazy changes can be made. Plus 25% cold damage from all sources, plus 100% cold status application. This is effectively like Archon Vitality, but for cold. If something were to apply 2 cold statuses, it will apply 4, 1, it'll apply 2. This allows enemies to become frozen quicker. This is Chroma. If Chroma is applying these cold procs, he does it faster. This includes the aura itself, so Chroma can freeze enemies around him to gain more access to that critical damage that cold applies quicker. Additionally, plus 150% additive armor bonus, scaling with strength. And then in addition to dealing cold damage and status within cold elemental ward's aura, it will deal slash damage and status as well. A couple of notes. Heat has fewer buffs, so I upped its numbers to compensate in terms of the damage and the health itself. I kept the electricity retaliation that it currently has, but combined it with cold's properties. I wanted to keep toxin's percent health damage. I did. There are multiple versions of the script, but it just didn't fit. And then cold was changed from damage reflection to slashing, but this slashing part will fit in a later part of the kit. Vex Armor is a complicated one because I think it's already a fine ability, and I also don't really know what to name it. I thought about like Wrathful Guardian, Furious Guardian, something that reflects that Chroma is giving his team damage and protection. I really like where Vex Armor sits. Okay, the way it currently works it has like Chroma taking different kinds of damage to shield and health, or dealing melee and ranged takedowns for whether it's like damage or armor. So the changes I'd make here are pretty limited. I'd probably make Fury multiplicative and work on the math a little bit, maybe turn on the numbers, but I want it to be competitive with Mirage's Eclipse, right? So there's really no reason it should be, especially when it has a condition, unlike Eclipse. Eclipse used to have a condition, which is what made it quote-unquote like worse or whatever, but Eclipse is now conditionless. So if we're going to keep Chroma's condition on his Vex Armor, it should be a better number than Mirage's, in my view. Scorn can remain mostly the same. I think that armor's fine. I thought about making it DR, then it's kind of too close to Eclipse, and I don't really like that. I would alter the conditions so that allies within the range of Vex Armor can stack the buff for Chroma, so it's a collective effort by his team. I think that'd be cool, because Chroma's not always going to be the carry in your lobby, and I think that's totally fine. Consider removing the condition altogether, because it makes Chroma kind of weak in situations without a bunch of ads to take out. But, you know, you have to consider not every frame should be strong in every scenario, and that's totally fine. Some frames should dominate the boss engagements, some frames can dominate like crowd control, large like swarms of enemies, stuff like that. So that's like, if that's the cost of having this ability to be really strong, I think keeping that condition is fine. It adds some skill to playing the character anyway. And if not, limiting it to just like taking damage builds the armor, and dealing damage builds the damage component. I'm not really an in-deep Chroma player. I had to playtest him a lot for this video, but in terms of Vex Armor, I don't think any major changes are required, so any little changes are basically up to you guys. Post them in the comments. I think it's an acceptable ability, especially with a few modernization changes. Okay, Effigy is a bit of a long one, but I promise it's worth the time. I think this is my most proud idea. Now called Draconic Pelt. So Effigy stays kind of the same, or Draconic Pelt, I guess, stays the same functionally. You can remove it to deploy the Pelt, and it's a sentry that deals damage per second, doubles your credits, drains energy per second. In this case, Effigy will also have a higher threat level, pulling enemy aggression. Damage put into the Pelt contributes to charge both parts of Furious Guardian. So damage the Pelt takes, absorbed from enemies, contributes to Furious Guardian or Vex Armor. Draconic Pelt no longer has a health bar, it is invulnerable. And also, Draconic Pelt, the ability, has a new passive. Chroma gains 25% damage reduction and immunity to any of the statuses present in any of his elemental wards while Draconic Pelt is deactivated. So Chroma is wearing the Pelt in this case. When the Draconic Pelt is out, Chroma gains plus 25% movement speed and 25% parkour velocity. So when he has it on, that's some status immunity to elemental wards, plural. Oh, what does this mean? We're going to find out in a second. And when it's out, he gains the movement stats that are ideal and very nice. So, instead of just dealing selected damage, Draconic Pelt mirrors your active elemental ward when it is deployed, doubling in range, occasionally firing chromatic balls of its equipped element at enemies. Changing your elemental ward as Chroma does not change the deployed elemental ward on Draconic Pelt. Instead, firing a chromatic ball of a new element into Draconic Pelt's radius will absorb the ball, mixing the elements and creating a new elemental ward that deals the damage and status of the mixed elements, while giving the buffs from both elemental wards inside to allies within affinity range. As long as they're in the range of either Chroma or the Draconic Pelt, they would have to be in range of both. This means that potentially we are getting 3 elemental ward buffs at once. Say Chroma has Cold equipped, puts down his Draconic Pelt, switches to Toxin, throws down the Toxin one, a Toxin chromatic ball inside of it. You now have a viral elemental ward. This gives the cold buff with the armor and whatnot, and the slash damage, which is why I'm saying you could get a viral slash Draconic Pelt turret. That'd be kind of nice, right? That's why I included the slash in there, not only because it's cold, which is like slash damage. I think that thematically makes sense. So you're getting whatever buff Chroma has equipped. Say he switches to heat now. You're going to get the heat elemental ward buff, the toxin elemental ward buff, and the cold elemental ward buff as Chroma and as his teammate. This is a wide variety of buffs, a lot more stats, a lot more for Chroma to do, and also a lot more thoughtful of a playstyle, which I think is really neat. I think it's way cooler than his current ultimate, and something that's really exciting and also like encourages him to use his entire kit. This whole combo I've described uses 3 of his 4 abilities. In terms of augments, luckily there's nothing that actually like super crazy here. We have Afterburn. In this case, it's just the chromatic ball will leave behind a DOT field of the element used in the ball. dealing DPS. That's it. Everlasting Ward would remain the exact same. Guardian Armor remains the exact same. Vexing Retaliation, I just don't care about making good, so I'm not going to put the effort into the script. And Guided Effigy kept the same, probably with some number adjustments in there due to its outdated nature. Okay, now we can kind of like summarize our changes that we've made. So for passive, we kept the same. Chroma's 1 is made into a useful ability that can provide us utility through status if we decide to, but mainly for the energy and health orbs, along with its synergy with Draconic Pelt. I think Chromatic Ball is a really solid ability, really solid change. It's something simple still, just like Spectral Scream was, but something that is more worth using and is a harder sacrifice to make in the Helminth system. Elemental Cloak is now actually, the field it makes is now relevant. If you elect to mod for range, you gain something from that, you benefit from that. You're able to, easily, just like before, easily switch between the buffs, but it's now bound to the Elemental Cloak button, your 2, instead of your 1, so if you do elect to take Chromatic Ball off, you don't suffer from that. Additionally, in the Helminth system, because Elemental Cloak would be the ability you give to other frames, they can easily rotate through the elements as well. I could see a situation where someone like Lavos might want access to all of those different elements, right? Personal opinion, but I think that's pretty exciting. Vex Armor or Wrathful Guardian, Furious Guardian, whatever. That's the name I'm the least confident on. Is very much similar. Some streamlining, some modernization changes, and having his teammates be able to build it with him, I think is all it really needs. I actually think Vex Armor was in a fine spot, but when people mention Chroma having like 2 abilities, Vex Armor makes up like 1.5 of that, really, to be honest. And then Draconic Pelt is obviously an insanely exciting new ability that can prime an entire area. Again, if you build for range, you're further incentivized, you're further rewarded for it, because Draconic Pelt doubles Elemental Ward size on it when it mirrors your Elemental Ward. So it also has more utility. Draconic Pelt is able to stack Furious Guardian as it pulls enemy aggression and absorbs the damage into Furious Guardian. The passive between having Pelt on and off means Chroma has multiple ways to play, which is, in my view, one of my favorite parts about certain Warframes, is when I switch from loadout A to loadout B, it feels like I'm playing a entirely different frame. That could be, the best example might be like Saren Weapon Platform versus Saren Spore, right? Like those two setups are so different, but they're on the same frame, and whatever mission type I'm in or whatever vibes I'm even feeling, I can equip either one. And if I'm a Saren player, I'm excited because I still get to play Saren, but it's in different ways, and it's a lot more of a broad understanding of the frame, ball knowledge of the frame that I can apply. And to me, that's really exciting. Most frames, in my view, don't actually get that option, which is disappointing. And then the augments, I think, fortunately, the augments, I know in future reworks, augments are going to be a lot more work. Thankfully, in this one, it actually wasn't very much work at all, because Chroma has in my view, pretty solid, like, foundational, I guess in terms of concepts, he's foundationally sound, so the augments just do kind of the same things as they did before, and he wouldn't need them, I don't think, with this rework. So a couple ideas that didn't make it quite. The main one I elected not to include, but if you guys think it fits, some sort of like shock trooper, flash freeze, or whatever it's called, or freeze force rather, fireball frenzy type deal with elemental ward, imbuing Chroma's weapons. I thought that could be really strong. The only thing is, like, well, maybe I want the modding of the weapon that you're using, and the modding of the weapons you're using, I should say, and the modding of your Chroma to be kind of like in tandem. That kind of gets removed if you give elemental imbue to your weapons through elemental ward. It still could be a good idea, but it might overload the ability more than it's already pretty strong. But also, again, I like, building your frame and weapons in tandem. I think that's a really exciting experience. But if you think the elemental ward could benefit from like a freeze force type deal, depending on the element you have equipped, I think that could be something pretty solid, or maybe make that an augment. I'm not really sure. I'm not really for that, but some people believe that those augments are fine. So whatever. That's the main idea left on the table. Actually, every cool idea I had made it into this rework. Again, Same thing as always, if you think something is too overtuned, be productive in my comments. Reworks, it's not something that a lot of Warframe creators make, so I don't really know how to do it properly. I can't playtest things, I can just write really long scripts, and that's about it. So hopefully this is something you enjoyed. Again, like every post of mine, this is an invitation to discussion. Whatever you want to talk about regarding Chroma or Warframe in general. And one thing is, one question I have for you guys, what kind of visual aids help you the most when I'm making these kinds of reworks? Some rework content does not really benefit from a visual aid, but this one in particular I think really did. And I only know how to use like MS Paint and GIMP and a couple other graphic softwares. I am not a graphic designer, not even close. So if there's something that would help you guys visually, please leave that in the comments. Whatever you want to see reworked, also leave it in the comments, because this is actually the content, despite getting lesser views, this content is my favorite to make definitively. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for the hypes, subs, whatever, your viewership. Thank you. I have so much love for you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.